modified. And it's very hard to check out all events. These little bits are partial bits of what they call information. And it's very hard for us to say, it looks like the shadow of a person, I wonder if it is. All right, it is possible then, perhaps, to be able to decode something like this as a pictorial simplification of what? Yeah, a pictorial simplification of the pyramids. We can almost get away with this. We might get away with this. And it is possible that, like I tried to indicate in the past, when somebody drew a male, they drew the male like this. They drew the legs, and they drew this extension coming down. And the female, they just drew this area. That was the major difference. And male, woman. In very early development of language, they used to do pictorials. And so today we've gotten so far away from that, the small a and the capital A and the King's English and the curlicues, thick and thin lettering, you know, that type of shit. And had all kinds of crap. Wouldn't leave it alone. And they kept it. And then, of course, you think I'm kidding. They actually, some people went to work piddling with the inside of that shit, too. Do you know that? On marriage certificates. Way back in the early days, like $1 bill. You got more shit on there than you can flush in any toilet bowl. I mean, when it comes to gingerbread patterns, money, marriage certificates, contract certificates, would you call it surplus information? What would you call it? What would you call decoration? Clutter. All right?
Aesthetic information.
What?
Aesthetic insignificant information.
Insignificant information.
We're supposed to make it more impressive, though. It's supposed to impress the
And
recipient.
how can it be impressive?
Just by its excess. They figure if they've got time to be this excessive, it must be something.
Why don't they send you a certificate of debt with excess on it?
They probably do. I don't know.
If you owe $10,000, why don't they send you a beautiful gold inlay type thing saying you owe $10,000? It just says pay or you'll be picked up at 4 o'clock. Very plain. See, it's only in a warranty or guarantee that you have a silver ribbon hanging on your shirt. All kinds of, yeah, you don't laugh at that stuff yet, but someday people will. At diplomas and all that kind of shit, which they hand. It's a piece of paper printed to look like it has great significance.
But it's a picture also. You often hang those things up, and it has to look nice in your house.
Visual
The diploma,
noise.
it's visual.
Visual noise.
Visual. No, it's probably derivative from another time when people
Yeah,
had
right.
papyrus.
Is it necessary?
Oh, no,
Right, see. So you get into information. Now we'll talk about simulation of information. At certain times, people try to impress other people. And they used to get a whole batch of United Cigar Store coupons. That doesn't mean anything to most of you, does it?
No.
United Cigar Store coupons. And the United States Navy used to go to China many years ago with a lot of United Cigar Store coupons. And they go in the Chinese stores and they buy lamps and things. And he'd stash it away. And these things, you know, it didn't take the Chinese too long, you know, maybe 6 months. And in the meantime, they came away with a lot of goods. So what they did is simulated information. It's called deception. All right? There are other people who took United Cigar Store coupons in great numbers and put a $100 bill on the top of the United Cigar Store coupons and a couple of rubber bands around it. They went into a store and they peeled off $100 bills and said, "Can you change this?" Right. And that caused people to be impressed by them. Now, the technique that was used, has to do with information. A guy would come into a church and be very well dressed. He'd rent a Rolls Royce for an hour or 2 hours. This guy would pick him up. He'd get out, he'd come into the church, and he'd take out that mirror there and peel off $100 while everybody was giving $2 or $3 or $4. And $100. He said, Then he'd walk in and say, who is he? What does he do? Then he would come in back to the church during a social on a land promotion scheme. And thousands of people would want to buy into this wonderful, God-fearing, good-giving man. Okay? And so what he did is simulate the greedy fucking values of the people that attend the church. He simulated their values. So they got sucked in. Okay? But if they were churchmen, they'd say, oh no, I don't want to make that much profit on my fellow man. Anyway, it didn't work that way. So he had people to continuously simulate information. Can you name other examples of information simulation?
Newspapers.
All right.
Commercial.
What?
Well,
Commercial.
public relations in general. I mean, if you
Rubber tits,
rubber tits. Yeah.
rubber ass,
Well, don't take that away if you.
artificial
It's a real
hair,
thing now. Huh?
artificial hair.
Rubber dolls, life size,
Whatever.
female, male.
Yeah, all right. Now, what is information? How can you deal with that kind of word? So, if you sit down and try to figure out an approach to our life's problems, you're going to have to do what Fuller does to some extent. Whenever he runs into a linguistic jam, he invents his own language. And he says, all right, here's a new word. This is what it means. And from here on out, it's much easier than, so what do you mean by information? You can get stuck wrestling with people because they have different associations as genuine as yours. When you start talking about new ideas, they look at dictionary and they'll argue because here's exactly what it means. See? And so it's better to invent a new word and then you don't go through all that shit. And you say, where the hell did that word come from? Don't say it came from you. Say it came from a professor of language at Oxford. Then you repeat it. But if you say it came from you, who are you? Euripides Sneed? A new word? Not worth a shit. All right, so if you invent words, go on and invent a more appropriate word. No one has the right to say this is the only word that you use. Now, we think, when we write books, we always look in a dictionary or a thesaurus to find an appropriate word. Make your own words, because you'll find, you get up in your school and say, it's not adequate. She said, what do you mean it's not adequate? Everybody's been using it for thousands of years. They've been beheading people for thousands of years. They've been burning people for thousands of years. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it useful. Therefore, I suggest that you, when you use a new word, in the beginning of your book or the end of your book, you have an explanation of the new word. Do you ever see things like that? Fuller uses it, and technical journals use it when they write for the layman. They have a built-in dictionary at the back of the word, glossary of terms. All right? Now, a lot of you people here are afraid to do that. Well, you're afraid that you don't have command of the English language. Command of the English language is nothing but trouble. If you had good command of the English language, it means you're stubbornly non-utilitarian. Good command of the English language forces you to a discipline that's inadequate. Therefore, you've got to change the language. And we suffer sometimes, when we sit back and try to solve a problem, a lot of us, at least most of us here, think in terms of words. We sit back and we think, well, can I use you? Paulette? We think in terms of my grandmother. She's a fucking grandmother, bothers my ass. We think in terms of words. And the words that we think about are the old words. So that's why it's hard for us to work out a problem. Now, you don't have any problem. No one has any psychological problems when you show a movie and it shows the floor getting hotter while a person's lying on it. It shows the temperature going up and the audience yells, get up and get off. Get up and get off. Notice how appropriate everyone is? Well, the Indians is, but they're very appropriate. And you see a tremendous alligator coming out of a swamp, and there's a little baby playing, and the mother is sewing something, looking the other direction. The audience says, turn your head, you fool. See? They're very appropriate. Look, save your child. When the alligator comes out of the water. So, people have kind of appropriateness. Language has put in so much elaboration, sometimes in between the act of behavior, that can you think of the elaboration of language? Whereas a certain particular aspect of behavior is desirable, think of elaboration, and even in technology or medicine, that isn't necessary. Yeah. Suppose I walked into your house and you said, how do you do? I said, how do you do what? Oh, how do you do? How do you do? Think about the words. What the hell? How do you?